Meet Sala, the procurement lead officer at ABC Company. Sala and his team have been in negotiations with XYZ Company for 3 months now, and they have almost reached an agreement. All that's left is what type of contract they will be using. Sala is still undecided on the best suited contract for this specific deal. Let's refresh Sala's mind and walk him through all the different types of contracts to help him decide. In order to break down the main types of purchasing contracts, we need to understand that almost all contracts fall into 2 big categories: fixed price and cost-based. Each category has many different types of contracts. Let's simplify what each one means and when it is most advantageous to use them. First, we have fixed price contracts. The meaning is in the name. Price is mostly set in advance, and it rarely changes. There are 4 main types. The first type is a firm fixed price contract. This type locks in a single price for a project, regardless of the seller's actual costs. This of course exposes both sides to some level of risks. For example, if market costs go up, then suppliers lose money, as they are being paid less than what these materials cost, but if market costs go down, then buyers are overpaying for products that can be bought for less. This type of contract is simple to manage, but both sides take inevitable risks, though the supplier bears most of this risk. The second type is fixed price with escalation. It is usually used for long-term contracts when costs have a chance of rising or changing. The contract sets a base price, but allows adjustments either up or down from the original set price, based on predefined market indicators. All price changes should be keyed to a third-party price index, preferably to a well-established, widely published index, like the Producer Price Index. This ultimately protects both buyer and supplier from any major price swings. Moving on to the third type of fixed price contracts, we have fixed price with redetermination. This type is used when actual costs are hard to predict. Both the buyer and supplier agree on a temporary target price, and then after production has begun and actual costs have been incurred, they review the real costs and set a new firm price. But you must be careful with these types of contracts, as contracts that call for an agreement to agree in the future are not enforceable by law, leaving both sides vulnerable. Finally, we have the last type, which is fixed price with incentives. This type is similar to a redetermination contract, but it includes a cost-saving element. Purchasers promise suppliers that any savings that they achieve from an initially set price target are going to be shared between the supplier and the purchaser at a predetermined rate. Meaning if the supplier produces more efficiently, the savings are shared. For example, 50-50. This type of purchase contract is typically utilized under conditions of high cost per unit and relatively long lead times. Moving on to cost-based contracts. These are contracts where price depends on the supplier's actual incurred costs. It is used when costs are too uncertain for a fixed price contract, or the item is complex or expensive. In this category, we also have 4 main types. Let's take a closer look. The first type is cost plus incentive fee. The supplier is reimbursed for all incurred costs. And if the supplier saves money in the process, the savings are shared between the buyer and the supplier. This type is mostly used when prices are predictable and both sides have decent confidence in their ability to estimate the cost. Moving on to the second type of cost-based contracts, which is cost-sharing contracts. Buyer and supplier split allowable costs by a percentage. For example, the buyer pays 70% and the supplier pays 30%. It is usually useful for when working in a dynamic environment where raw material prices are rising and changing. This prevents the supplier from going bankrupt or experiencing great financial strain due to rising costs. The third type of cost-based contracts is time and materials (T&M) contracts. This type of contract is employed in plant and equipment maintenance agreements, where the supplier cannot determine accurate costs prior to the repair service. The contract should spell out the appropriate labor rate, which is generally computed on a per-hour basis, plus an overhead and profit percentage, resulting in a not-to-exceed total price. Our final type of cost-based contracts and the last contract we will discuss is cost plus fixed fee. Here the supplier gets reimbursed for all allowable costs plus a specific set fee. This in turn will guarantee suppliers a profit, but unfortunately does little to incentivize them to reduce costs and thus is often criticized when used too widely. To be most effective, cost-based contracts should include cost productivity improvements to drive continuous cost reduction over the life of the contract. With that, we have discussed all major types of purchasing contracts. Now, what do we learn from all of this? Our key takeaway is that you should always try to balance risk for both the supplier and buyer in order to maintain a long and healthy relationship between both where costs are fair and just. Making sure you always try to end your negotiations with a win-win situation. Salah now is better informed on which contract best suits his future project and feels confident in his decision and choice of contract. Now wish him luck as he goes back to wrap up negotiations. Thank you for your kind attention.